My name is Caroline. I am, if you've seen our YouTube channel, I'm your trucking business professor at the Bobtail Help Desk. And what I do at Bobtail is I gather all of the information about the industry that could be useful to carriers, and I organize it and I put it out on the internet for free for everyone to have access to. So that includes these sessions, that includes our YouTube channel, our blog, bobtail.com. Go check out our blog. We have so many resources out there for free, instructions on compliance requirements. You've got tips on how to negotiate and use load boards. You've got tips on how to hire drivers. So lots and lots of information out there, all curated by yours truly. So definitely check that out. And if there's anything missing in those resources, please let us know. You can contact us, hello@bobtail.com, and let us know, what are your questions? You can put your questions in the chat here, of course, about our session today. But if you have anything that you'd really like to be learning more about and that we're not providing, please let us know, because I want to know what you want to learn about, because I want to learn about it. Like I said, my name is Caroline. I'm joined here today by my colleagues at Bobtail, Veronica and Donovan. And what do we do at Bobtail? We are a financial services provider for the trucking industry. We have our factoring service. We're going to be launching a new product momentarily, really, in the next week or so. So definitely keep an eye out for that. But this is an online workshop where you're going to learn some of the basics about finding good loads for your trucking company and how to negotiate with brokers and how to work with brokers. So let's talk about how to find loads. We always recommend learning how to dispatch your own trucks. A lot of people think that dispatching is this really super specialized, really hard thing to learn. I'm not saying it's easy. Dispatching trucks is not easy. That's why we're here, right? But it is something that you can learn how to do yourself. And here's where you're mainly going to find your loads is load boards, right? DAT, 123 load board, truck stop. Now, of course, the ultimate goal is to have repeat customers so that you don't necessarily have to use load boards every time you're looking for a load. You can call up your customers that you've already served, let them know you're available, let them know what kind of services you're still offering, and you can build that book of business so that you don't have to go to the load boards all the time. But especially when you're first starting out, it's going to be those top load boards. And if you're in the first weeks or months of your business, you are going to need probably to use these load boards like Landstar, TQL. These are the biggest freight brokerages, and they have their own load boards, right? And so you're going to need to probably go here first if you're a brand new MC. Why is that? That's because these are the biggest brokerages. They have the most freight, of anybody, of any brokerage, and they are more flexible in who they will work with. So they will work with brand new MCs. And you will still have to, of course, be competing with everybody else who wants loads from these big brokerages, but they have so much freight that they will work with new MCs. And once you get some of those first loads under your belt, then you're going to be able to go back to those big load boards, DAT, 123, and truck stop, and you're going to be able to find loads and find smaller brokerages and create relationships with them as well. But if you're first starting out, this is really where you are likely to be. I'm using the DAT1 load board, so I'm going to go ahead and share that with you. So I did a quick search of today's loads from Chicago to Atlanta. Again, I'm based in the Midwest. I'm a Midwest girl. So I'm going to be looking for loads out of the Midwest. So I went ahead and looked. The origin obviously is where you're coming from. Destination is where you're going to. DHO and DHD. So this means deadhead miles from origin. How far from my origin am I willing to go out of my way to get the load? And then deadhead from destination. How far away from that destination am I willing to go to, right? Type of equipment, I looked for dry van, but you can search for any type of equipment in there. And then the date range, I'm looking for loads. I was looking for loads for today. So that's what I looked at. Another good search filter to work out here is the search back. So I think by default, it gives you all of the loads that have been published in the last 24 hours. Now, that can be advantageous. So there's a couple of things to think about when you're booking loads. If the load has been published a while ago, let's say 24 hours ago, that probably means that that broker has gotten quite a few calls for that load, right? So you may have more competition going into a call with a load that's been published on the load board for a while. Now, the other reason that it may have been on there for a while is that that broker is having a hard time getting that load moved, right? And so if it's been on there for quite a few hours, they might start to get anxious and really need to move the load. So they may be willing to pay a little bit more to someone who is close by and who can move that load fast. So those are two things to think about when you're looking at the search back. I just did the last hour. Typically, I think if you're looking for loads, you typically would want to be one of the first carriers calling. So if they've just posted it in the last hour, you have a better chance of being one of the few people that have called about that load, right? There's lots of information on these load boards, so you can come in here and click on the company name. So this is the brokerage that has posted this load. So let's check out this brokerage here, BM2 Freight Services, Inc. Cancel. You can click into that and find more information about them. So DAT will give you reviews on that broker. They'll give you all their, information that's available on the FMCSA website. You can also go, if you're considering that load, then you can go to the FMCSA's website and make sure all of that information matches. And so that's how you're going to use this information on the load board. Obviously, you can see things like weight. You can see things like, what kind of trailer you're going to need to haul that load. Lots of information on there. I highly recommend when you're going to look for loads, make sure you look at all of that information that's posted about that load before you call, so that you're not calling that broker and asking them things that someone could see on the load board, right? Hey, how much is it? How much does the load weigh? More like, hey, I saw that this load is listed for 34,000 pounds. Is that right? Just verify the information with the broker. Don't ask them something that they've clearly already communicated on the load board. So that's take the time to really be educated about the load that you're inquiring about. One of the things that we highly recommend to all of the carriers that work with us, really any carrier, is check the broker's credit rating before you book a load. Before you confirm a load, check their credit rating. Of course, it's important to be able to know whether or not that your factoring service will factor that invoice. That's a question that credit rating check can answer. The other questions that it can answer, though, is how reliable is this broker to pay? So, for example, with Bobtail, you don't necessarily have to factor every single account. You could have a broker that you decide you want to get paid directly from. Regardless of whether or not you're factoring that invoice, you'd want to know how likely they are to pay you, right? And a lot goes into our credit rating system at Bobtail. So it's not just their credit score. It's also their payment history with us. It's also if they have any potential history of fraud or double brokering, we won't factor invoices from them. We will let you know that they have a bad rating. And so a lot goes into that rating. So take that rating seriously. Not all rating systems are created equal. You can find rating systems on load boards and other factoring services. You'd want to look into what goes into that rating system. How reliable is that? And ours takes in a lot of factors into consideration. It's not exactly my favorite thing to do. It can be challenging, but it is something as a business owner that is paramount. You really have to know how to negotiate with your customers in a friendly, professional way in order to get the best prices for what you do. So let's go over a couple of things. One of the most important things that you can do for your business to be able to negotiate better rates is to know your cost per mile. That might sound really basic. If you don't know the answers to those questions, it's a non-starter. Can't help you negotiate with brokers. We can't help you negotiate with brokers if you don't know your cost per mile. Not because you're going to share that with the broker. You're not. Don't do that. But because if you don't have your cost per mile, you don't have any starting point for what you should be charging for what you do, right? We wrote an article on this on our blog about managing finances for small trucking businesses. Alejandra will share that in the chat. Go to it. Great question, Araceli. That blog answers that question for you. How do you calculate that? Really quickly, here's the formula. Fixed costs plus variable costs divided by the number of miles, right? Your fixed costs are those costs that do not change. So what a lot of people do is they'll take their variable costs, they'll take fuel, driver pay, maintenance, and they'll divide that by the number of miles. Oh, that's my cost per mile. No, you need to add in those fixed costs. Fixed costs are things that don't change with how much you drive, with how much you run your trucks. That's insurance, that's your truck payments, that's your own salary. If you are salaried, maybe you're driving, so maybe you pay yourself a rate per mile, but maybe you are your own salaried employee. Those are your fixed costs. You have to include those. That's how you are going to know, am I going to lose money on this load? Am I going to earn money on this load? Am I going to break even on this load? Again, if you don't have the answer to that question, it's a non-starter. You have to be able to know that, have that in your mind, so you can know how much you're going to be making on that load. Almost always, and I say almost, but almost always, no load is better than a load you're going to lose money on. Now, I say almost because sometimes it will be worth it to lose a little bit of money on a load to go to an area of the country where you're going to get better rates. Sometimes, but not often, not very often at all, right? That is in pretty extreme circumstances. You need to at least be breaking even to then get to another place that's going to then make you money on those loads. So that is why that number is so important. Another important data point to have is to know your routes and understand what is the average rate that this route is going for. If you're looking at Chicago to Atlanta, we just looked at that. The average, what we saw in those loads, is about $1,600. You know then that if you get a broker calling you and telling you they're going to pay you $3,000 from Chicago to Atlanta for a drive-in, something weird is going on, right? You got it. That's a red flag. That's not even close to what the average is right now. Hold on, let me check. Let me make sure this MC number is really what this company is listed as. Let me make sure this email that I'm getting this email from is this broker's email, because something could be fishy there. You might be able to get $1,750. You might be able to get $1,800 if you have the right conversations and you're working with the right customers. But you will then know where your starting point is, where you have room to negotiate and grow. So let's talk about that really quickly, and then I want to bring on Donovan here because I know you all will have lots of questions for him. I know I do, but knowing your cost per mile, knowing the average rate, these are the points that you need to know to make your starting point. These are not the points you're going to make to the broker. You're not going to tell your broker, well, it's not, my cost went up this last month, so my cost per mile is way up because I had to do a lot of maintenance on my trucks. Honestly, they don't care. They could be great people. They could be wonderful people who really care about you as a human being, but from their business perspective, they don't care about your cost per mile. You need to care about that, but they don't care about that. So what do they care about? What is the leverage that you have to negotiate? They care about their customers, their shippers, right? They care about their reputation. They care about protecting their business. They care about making money, yes, but they care about growing and building relationships with their customers. And how do they do that? They do that by providing the best service. And who's providing the best service? You are, as the carrier, right? Because what the broker wants to do is to turn their customers into repeat business. They want their customers, just like you want the same brokers and shippers coming back to you because they love how you work. The same thing, brokers want the same thing for their shippers, right? So it's up to you to put yourself in the position of where your business is their partner in doing spectacular work for their customer. That's the mindset that you need to have. And so how exactly do you do that? There are lots of things that we're going to talk about, and Donovan is going to talk about more things than I can. He can speak to it a lot more as an expert in this industry. But one of the things that I've learned after doing these seminars, we've had lots of people on these seminars. We've had an actual freight broker on these seminars before, Dale, who talked about a lot of different things that you can do. If you want to hear directly from him, go to our YouTube channel. We have all of the recordings of the last sessions that we've done. We've done one about every couple of weeks for the last month or so, last 2 months actually. So go back and look at those recordings with Dale. He gave a lot of really good advice. But there are some key things that you can do first to legitimize your business. Remember that the trucking industry right now, more than ever really, is plagued with fraud and theft. So when you're getting in touch with a broker for the first time, you need to prove that you are not a fraudster before they will believe that fact. You need to prove to them that you are a legitimate business. So how do you do that? If you're using a Gmail, Yahoo, or otherwise generic email address, stop doing that. Go get yourself a branded business domain for your email. If I'm A1 Freight, then I want my email to be Caroline@a1freight.com. That's what I would want for my business. That's going to make me look a lot more legitimate than just a1freight@gmail.com. Then when you get that domain, set up a website. That sounds kind of complicated. I'm telling you right now, I'm a digital marketing expert. It's not hard. Websites are not hard. They are very easy to put together on something like Squarespace, something like Wix. They will literally design it for you. You have to do nothing but upload your information and a photo. Boom, there you go. It's quite economical to get one of those services. It's maybe $10 or $20 a month, and it is totally worth it because then you can send that link, hey, a1freight.com, check me out. That has your contact information. It should have your MC number. It should have photos of your trucks and the equipment that you have. And it should have really just that really basic information. That can be one page. But if you have a website, that legitimizes your business. Lots of other things you can do to legitimize your business. I'm not going to go over all of them because I know we want to talk and hear from Donovan, who is our expert today. So definitely go back, check out the recordings from the last sessions that we've had. A quick note on here. This is a tough business to be in. I want to make that clear from the get-go. This is a really challenging industry to be in. Emotions can run high. The best thing you can do when you're negotiating is to stay calm and cool. I am not by nature a very calm person. You might be able to tell that from the way I'm presenting. My team at Bobtail can certainly attest to that. I'm not always the most level-headed person. But I know that the most valued person in the room, the most respected person in the room is always the calmest, most level-headed person. If you can maintain that on phone calls and maintain your professionalism and always keep your cool, you will have a much easier time of negotiating. This is much easier said than done. I will give you that. But it is a really important piece to that puzzle. All right, let's bring in Donovan. I know I've been talking about him a lot, and we've talked to him on past seminars as well. Donovan, thank you so much for joining us. I know you are such a busy man. You are one of our customer service managers at Bobtail. So thank you, Alejandra, for giving it up in those reactions for Donovan. Donovan has been in the trucking industry and transportation industry for many, many years now. So Donovan, can we just start off with that? How did you get into trucking, and what's your experience been like in this industry?
Yeah, hi. Hello, Caroline. Hello, everyone. Like you said, my name's Donovan. I've been in transportation now for basically my whole adult life. Got out of high school, didn't go to college, wanted to get into transportation and started dispatching. I started for the Red Cross, and then that moved to trucking companies and using load boards. And then I actually worked for the owner of Bobtail's trucking company, because that's where he started. He had a trucking company. We had about 24, 25 trucks, and me and him did all the booking, the operations, all of the shabam. So did that for a couple of years, and now I'm here with Bobtail. This, as Caroline said, this business right now, the market is as worse as it's been. There's a lot of people struggling. Brokers are struggling. Factoring companies are struggling. There's a big gap in what freight used to pay to what it pays now. So this is where you need to learn how to really organize your company and what to do to make sure that you get the most value out of that money that you are putting into your fuel, into your trucks, into your drivers, into your maintenance, into your load boards, into everything that you are using. So it is really important now, especially now, to really sit down before you get going to get a plan, organize something, and set your goals. Know what you want to do for the week. Don't just hop on a load board, grab the first load you see that pays decent money, and just get going. Because that's how you end up in dead areas. That's how you end up in areas where you're not going to find much freight. It's just going to cost you more money to deadhead somewhere to go pick up another load. So really taking the time and planning what you want to do for the week, how much money you want to make, and where are you trying to get to, and where do you want to go. It's important
Donovan,
to take that time.
Can you share, really good points, can you share what does that planning look like when you were dispatching loads every day for what, 30 trucks, 40 trucks? What was your planning process like? Tell me about it. You wake up, you pour yourself a coffee or tea. I don't know what
soda.
What you do in the morning.
I'm a soda guy for some reason.
Mountain Dew. You pour yourself your morning Mountain Dew. And what is the planning that you do? What tools do you use to learn where the hot markets are?
DAT. You're able to look at DAT. They're able to tell you, hey, how much dollar per mile have they been spending or paying carriers to go from point A to point B. You can use DAT to determine if the rates they have been paying is something that you are, if that's in your goal range for the week. But yeah, normally I also take advantage of posting a truck on the DAT board, because you are able to post your truck, say, hey, I'm in Baltimore, Maryland right now, and I want to go to North Carolina. And then brokers would also go through and, make calls to carriers, just like you're calling some brokers. The brokers would call you. But, you start by just opening up the load board, placing in where you want to go. You have to be early on the load boards as well, because these loads get posted up very early, especially, this is harder for a West Coast carrier, because obviously East Coast is 2 hours ahead. So the West Coast people have to wake up a little bit earlier to really get on the East Coast boards, because they don't just post loads. Maryland people don't just post loads in Maryland. It's all over. So the more time you have dedicated to sitting in front of your computer, I know it sounds like too much work or something like that, but it's really not, because that is really where you are. That's where everything starts for your company. That's where That's where your goals begin. That's where you get your drivers going. So taking the time and spending it there will only benefit you in the long run.
Absolutely.
And lots of phone calls.
I'm curious for people who are on the call right now, message us in the chat. How early do you wake up to start booking loads? How early were you up in the morning booking loads, Donovan?
6:30, 7.
But you were on the East Coast.
Yep, I was on the East Coast. So that's luckily when everything opened up.
5 a.m. for somebody on the West Coast.
Yep.
That's early. So 4:42 Trinity Express. You got to be up early in the morning. You have to be up before the sunrise probably. Yep, 5 a.m. Absolutely. I have no doubt that that's how early you're up. So you're looking for loads. You found the hot markets and where you want to go and where you want to send your trucks. When you get on a call with a broker, what is your goal? What is your mindset when you pick up the phone and give them a call?
Don't settle. You can't just settle. Before you make that call, like Caroline said, if you're looking at a load on the load board and you see it goes from point A to point B, look at the route from point A to point B. See, am I going to be spending money on tolls here? Am I good? How far am I driving? How much fuel am I really spending? So you have to be prepared when you're making that call. So when you make that call, you can provide that broker with a reasonable number. So he's not going to just be like, okay, bye. A lot of them will still do that, even if you give them a reasonable number. And that's why it's important for you to put in the time. Because they want to squeeze the dollar. We know that. These brokers are here to make money, and they will make it at your expense, especially if you just take the first load you call just because you need to get moving, or you don't feel like spending more time on the load board. They will make their money, but when you call them, know that you know your value. Like, know what your driver is about to go through, or if you're the driver, know it. Explain that on the phone as well. Like, yeah, point out things about the load for them to justify them paying you more money. Be like, man, I'm going to spend $400 in tolls on this load. Come on, pay me the X amount of money. And they know what's reasonable as well, So don't be afraid to get hung up on. Don't be afraid for a guy to tell you no thanks and move on. But just don't settle. Pick your number and stick to it. If the first guy doesn't go for it, try somebody else. Keep trying. But do not settle, because that's their dream. They just want somebody to call them, say, hey, I'm going to give you this much money. And the carrier's like, yeah, okay, I'll take it. Thank you. But you do have the ability to negotiate with them. Do not settle.
Right. And the more that people know about the actual cost of that route and their own cost per mile, the better leverage carriers have to make those decisions, right? There's a reason that brokers are able to pay so little for a particular load. It's because somebody might be accepting that payment, that amount. So don't be that carrier that does that and brings down the prices for everybody.
And, look ahead of time as well. If you know you have a driver that's going to be in a location Friday and he needs to get home, start working out on that Tuesday. Post it, make some calls around. Don't necessarily have to book, because brokers will do that, If they know they have a load moving 5 days or 3 days from now, they're obviously not going to give you the whole pie, because they know they have more time to try and barter with more different carriers. But there are some good ones out there who will, just straight up, the first carrier that calls and offers him the rate that they're looking for, they will take it. So just be prepared. You don't want to have your driver stuck anywhere, because we all know the truck doesn't move. You have an angry driver, and nobody makes any money.
Right.
So it's important to just really, the time you put into it, plan ahead of time, know where your driver's going to be, and start looking as soon as you can. You can't ever book the load too early.
Right. Donovan, I know you have worked with thousands of carriers through Bobtail. What can you tell me about the current trends in fraud and how that's affecting carriers and how carriers can avoid becoming part of that statistic?
The fraud industry right now in trucking is massive. It's never been this bad. They even have, government involved. FBI is working on this now because it is widespread. It is everywhere. Here at Bobtail, we see hundreds and hundreds of invoices a day. We see about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fraudulent loads a day, meaning that the broker double brokered a load, booked the load through TQL, but then sold it as this new company that nobody's ever heard of to a carrier for, an unreasonable amount of money. The carrier thinks it's his lucky day because, oh, great, that's a lot of money for this load. But at the end of the day, it won't get paid. It's unfortunate because the carriers lose on this. If you don't act and if you do not pay attention, you can lose money. Some carriers have to close their business, especially for the carriers who go coast to coast, and hauling a coast to coast load for, at the end of the day, $0. Not a lot of companies can sustain that anymore, a massive hit like that. It's important that you as the driver or you as the dispatcher explain to your drivers how important it is to look at the paperwork that they receive at the shipper, because that paperwork will tell you the full story of the load. I know how it goes though. Like I said, I dispatched for a while. I dealt with a lot of drivers. Tired of sitting at the pickup for 4.5 hours when the broker promised them it would be 2 hours. You get your paperwork, you throw it in a folder, and then you rock out. You're ready to go. You want to get driving. But inspecting that paperwork is very important because the paperwork will tell you which carrier is supposed to be on that freight. If it doesn't say your name, that raises a question. Like, why does it tell me Caroline's trucking company hauled this when I know Donovan's trucking company picked this up? And if you're dealing with a broker and it tells you that there's a different broker listed on the PODs, if it tells you the load belongs to TQL, but you're hauling it for a different company, there's a reason behind that. And most of the time, it's not good. So it's important to stay tentative, look at the paperwork, and, use your human instincts when communicating with people. If they're trying to butter you up, that sounds, we all know how brokers are now for the most part, through communicating with them. Picking up on these fraudsters via the phone is something that you can do. Just pay attention to their cues, to what they say, and how often they call you when you're on the freight. Because while you're still on the freight, we can still work for you to try and get you paid from the real broker. But it's once these carriers deliver and then they send this paperwork to, a random phone number that they've been communicating with via text, that's when it becomes a lot harder, because they'll just turn around, send those PODs to the correct broker, ask for a quick pay, and then they get paid, and then they're out. And then at that point, even if we catch on to it, broker will tell us, sorry, I already paid another carrier for it. And we know how stingy these brokers are. They will definitely not pay twice for the same load. Yeah, just important. Check your paperwork. Tell your drivers that it's important, because it's basically like a stack of money that you have in your hands. Doesn't seem like much. And getting the paperwork signed. Like, make sure that, if it says carrier signature here, shipper's signature, receiver signature, have them do it. Have the carrier sign it. Write his name down. The driver, I, Donovan, my company, Donovan Trucking. Write it on there, just for your own sake. That way, if the real brokers do see this, they're like, why isn't telling me this information? It's just another way to help you. But inspecting the paperwork, writing your information, make sure the shippers and receivers sign it, because regardless, brokers might not even pay invoices because of missing signatures, even if it is not fraud.
Right. And that paperwork, like you said, is like the stacks. You're going to turn that into stacks of cash.
Mm-hmm.
So do that.
Treat it like it.
As quickly as you can. I don't know how many people on here are factoring with Bobtail right now, but if you are, you can always call us. You might be talking to Donovan directly. You might be talking to somebody. You can always call us and ask and say, hey, you know what? I'm getting a weird feeling about this load. I'm halfway there, or my guy is halfway there. My gal is halfway there, and I just don't know if this is quite right. Can you take a look at this? Can you take a look at this rate con? Does this look fishy to you? Call us, ask us. We will be there to help you. The last thing we want you to do is to send us paperwork for a load that you're not going to get paid for and that you're going to lose money on. That is the last thing that we want for you. The other thing is, and I heard this from you a couple days ago, Donovan, when we were talking about the kind of content that we're going to put together for this and actually the next seminar, because our next seminar, August 25th, is going to be all about fraud prevention. So we're going to get into a lot more detail of what you can do. But one of the things that you had mentioned was send in your paperwork for factoring as soon as possible and only send it to us. You don't even have to send your paperwork to anyone else except us, because we will help it get into the right hands. Don't let your customer bully you. Don't let your dispatcher bully you into sending them the information. If you send it to us, we will make sure it gets into the right hands, because we have all of the right information for all of the freight brokerages. So we can get it into the right hands faster, maybe even than the scammer can. So that's another point. If you're kind of doubting a load, call us. And once you do deliver that load, send it right away. It takes minutes. It takes minutes to send us the paperwork through the mobile app. So do it as soon as you possibly can. Donovan, anything you want to add?
Yeah. Yeah. And also what we're seeing now in the industry is, right, these hackers, these fraudsters, they're able to post loads on the DAT load boards for other companies.
Yeah.
So I just say I'm the fraudster. I would be able to go on the DAT board, post a load, say that I work for TQL, and have a random phone number there, and you call me and you think you're dealing with TQL, but you're not. You're dealing with me trying to steal your money. So use the internet as well. If you're working with a broker you haven't worked with before, and you get a phone number from like a weird number that doesn't make sense to where they're located, if it's different area codes, Google them, Google the company, or call Bobtail. That way you can make sure you're dealing with the real broker. If you're dealing with a random phone number, the chances could be that guy has no affiliation. But if you Google the real broker, or Safer them, Safer has the brokers' real phone numbers on there. So you're able to call the actual broker and just be like, hey, at the main line, so that you're dealing with the brokerage, right? Okay, I just picked up a load for your company going from this place to this place. Here's the load number. Can you validate this for me? And they would love to, because they also don't want their loads to get frauded, because them not knowing who has their freight on their back is also a huge liability for them and their customers.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So just use Safer. It's there. It's a shame, because that's what these guys are using as well to, get carrier details, get broker details, to do what they are doing. But you should also use it to your advantage. That's Safer Web. You're able to type in an MC number and they'll give you the full details of the company.
There's also a couple of other resources that we learned about in past seminars. So one of them is freightvalidate.com. Alejandra is going to put that in the chat. And so that's another good resource to use. That's a little bit more rigorous than Safer or FMCSA website. Of course, you still want to use those websites. You want to use everything that you have available to you. And then another good way to weed out fraudsters is to join validated communities and vetted communities. So freightclub.us is one of those kinds of communities that you can join. They vet everyone who comes in, brokers, carriers, and it's a great way to learn about other people in the industry and connect with other people in the industry who are actually who they say they are. So those are really great resources that you can use. Donovan, I'm curious, when you were booking loads every day for so many trucks, did you have, I think sometimes it's really easy to get on autopilot, right? And just kind of go through the motions, muscle memory, and it's easy to kind of lose track of some of these important points. Did you have some kind of checklist or standard operating procedure that you always used when you were booking loads to avoid some of these things? Or was that something you wish you would have had to avoid maybe some of the mistakes that were made?
See, luckily, 4, 5, 6 years ago, this wasn't as prevalent, the guys didn't have the tools they have now, because as technology grows, it's easier to manipulate things on the internet. But that's definitely a checklist. That's a great point. Having a checklist for yourself before booking a load, like make sure you check this information, make sure you check this information, because it's always better to be safe than sorry. But no, I did not have a checklist, because like you said, it was kind of just in the motion of things, because I've been, I did it for so long. But yeah.
Yeah, and Veronica, you're so right. It has so much to do with your experience, right? When you get into the motion of things, you will learn a lot, and you'll learn different techniques and tactics for yourself that work for you and your company. They might not work for everybody, but there may be a negotiating tactic that you've used with certain brokers that's worked really well. Write that down, put it on your checklist. If you do hire a dispatcher, train them on that. Let them know, and then let us know. You don't always have to share all your trade secrets with us to share with the rest of the world. But Monte has a question in the chat, Donovan, for you. Did you use a TMS system? What kind of technology were you using?
Well, we used DAT, and then we use Trucking Office.
Tell us more about that. What does Trucking Office do for your trucking business?
Well, Trucking Office is just a way for us to completely track everything. You're able to upload your loads just like you kind of would to Bobtail, and just type in the physical address of where your driver's picking up to the physical address of where he's delivering. They would calculate tolls for you. They would calculate the miles from point A to point B. So if a driver is taking loops, if a driver is supposed to drive 700 miles on a load but ends up driving 1,000, it's a way for you to just keep control of your costs, and have it down to a T. Not just going by the broker saying, oh yeah, it's 700 miles, from point A to point B. Having it in a system that will tell you all that information. It tells you, hey, on this load you made, after fuel, you can even type that in. Load's going to pay you $700. We paid $350 on fuel, spent $0 on tolls. It will tell you the exact amount you made dollar per mile, which is a great tool, because that way you can see which drivers are making money and which drivers, you need to just check a little bit closer and make sure that, they are going to where they're supposed to be going, so you aren't spending your fuel card money for just unnecessary miles.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know if anybody else on the call is using a TMS system. I believe that's transportation management system. It's basically a software that helps you track where all of your trucks are and how many miles they're running and what your cost per mile is, what your rate per mile is. It's a way of gathering all of that data together in a system. Now, I will say this, I have not had personal experience with a TMS in my career. I am going to do research on that though, Monte. So thank you for that question, because that is not a question that we've answered on the blog yet or on our YouTube channel. And we're going to do that because it is a great question. And it's also, I can imagine where a growing fleet might be saying, okay, at what point do I need a TMS, right? And so when you get to a certain point, you're going to need, you have so many trucks. What's the point when I need a TMS? I will say, though, I have used a lot of softwares and a lot of project management tools and a lot of scheduling tools and a lot of different things that are supposed to make life easier. And they're supposed to give you all of this data and all of this insight. But I will say, if you don't already have the process, the technology is not going to help. It's actually going to make things harder, because on top of trying to manage a TMS, you don't actually have the process of getting all of that information for the TMS to actually be useful. So if you don't understand the concept of your cost per mile, and you don't already have a spreadsheet that is working that out for you because you don't understand the concept of it, a software to help you do that is not going to be so helpful, because you in your human brain don't understand why you're doing what you're doing or why you're calculating it or how that calculation works. So you have to have that first. You have to have the process first. Take something really simple like signing up for this webinar, right? Signing up for this workshop. If I didn't already know that I wanted someone to be able to have access to the link to join when they signed up for the workshop, then the technology isn't going to just do that for me. It's not going to make decisions for you. So you have to know what decisions you're making. You have to know what kind of information you're including in that system so that you can use it to the best of your ability and you can get the most value out of it. So make sure you have your business model, your operations model planned out, mapped out. Make sure you could explain it to someone before you invest in technology that will help you then accelerate those processes and make those things more efficient. Great. So we are coming up to the end of the hour. I want to thank Donovan. Thank you so much for all of your time. This was really great. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the carriers on the call?
Yeah, just really quickly. You'll be dealing with a lot of brokers, right? So it's important that you have a packet together for your company, like a carrier packet. This will have your company's information, especially if you're a newer company, right? Your company information, DOT, your licensing and all that kind of stuff, with some references from people you have worked with and your insurance information. So it's easy for you to send those to new brokers that you are dealing with. Like, hey, let me send you my carrier packet. I know I can't get set up with you guys yet, but here, let's just get me into the system for when I do reach the eligibility point. You already have my information. You can see that I have strong references. And when you're ready to go with them, you'll be able to get set up. It's nice to have that for you because that shows that, hey, I know what's going on in my company. We are professionals. Everything is right here for you, because it's a lot about presentation with these brokers, how you communicate with them, what you provide them. So, as much as you can spruce it up to make your company seem as legit as possible, to make these brokers feel safe having you haul their freight for them, the more benefit you will see for your end. But that's it for me. I do appreciate everyone being here, just like Caroline said. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Donovan. That's such a good point. And in the last seminar, I asked this question of, would it be helpful for the carriers on the call, would it be helpful to have a carrier packet template that you could take, post your logo on, put your information in? Monte, you're saying yes. All right, I had a couple of yeses from the last seminar. So that is in the pipeline. We are going to put that together. We're going to put a template together for carriers so that you can just download that, update the information with your company name, all of your company contact information, and your logo. It is important to have a little logo. It can be super simple. Pay someone on Fiverr to do it for $50, $100, doesn't have to be much. You can probably get an AI generated one for your company name. Just have something that looks really professional, represents what you want to display and how you want to move through this industry. So I'm going to bring in our sales manager, Veronica Blanco. She is going to tell us all about Bobtail's factoring service. This is where you can get quick payments for your invoices. So there are a lot of factoring companies out there and a lot of services out there. Beto, why would carriers want to choose Bobtail for factoring?
Yes, very good. Thank you for everyone who's attending this workshop today, and for any future viewers that we are going to have in YouTube. It's vital information. Question is, why choose Bobtail for factoring? Bobtail has a mission with carriers, and that mission is to make sure that you are as knowledgeable as possible before you make any decision as far as who's going to be paying out your loads. There's so many things going out there, factoring companies that will promise you great rates. And I'm talking about rates such as 1.5%. And then you have other factoring companies telling you, you know what, we're going to offer you a 3%, 3.5%. Then it gets to you and you're like, why is it that we have factoring companies that offer you 1.5% and then you have factoring companies that offer you a little bit above that? What's the difference? I'll tell you the difference right now. And don't worry, I know this is a lot of information. I'll make it quick, very simple and easy. Bobtail does not have a long-term contract. What does that mean to you? It means the following. When you hear somebody tell you something that is so unbelievable, guess what? It's unbelievable because it's not true. Be very careful with the thin lines in your contracts. Number one reason you don't want to sign up with any other factoring company that is not Bobtail is you don't want to be stuck in a commitment for a very long time. It's like marriage. What if it doesn't work? Then you have to pull up a lawyer, go ahead and see if you can get out of that contract. Sometimes you even have to pay more money. With contracts, with factoring companies, that's what happens. They sign you up for a 1-year term. If you have any issues with them, if you get upset with them, guess what happens? Yeah, just like that last marriage you had, you're going to have to stick to it. And if you want to get out, guess what? There's money to be paid out, termination fees. Now, doesn't it sound beautiful if somebody just tells you, look, sign up with us. Don't worry about all that long-term stuff. We don't care about that. We don't. What we care about is for you to be very well informed, number one. Number two, we don't want any, fraudulent business coming in. So we keep our services on a 30-day to 30-day setup, meaning, hey, is there a contract? Yes, we have an agreement. Of course, everything has to be formal, but it's a 30-day agreement. This gives you the opportunity to get to know the factoring company, to get to know the process of factoring, find out how easy friendly our platform is. But better yet, you have a friend in this industry who not just only educates you, but we will make sure that it's a win-win situation. You have a factoring company you're signed up with right now. That's not an issue to us. Send us that contract. We'll review that contract and see where we are as far as taking you out of that contract. In some cases, it might be that we have to wait a little long, but we are here to help you. Number one thing you don't want to do is don't sign a long-term contract, no matter what you do. Even if you don't sign up with Bobtail, don't sign a long-term contract. You don't want to get yourself in that scenario. Number two, what is the number two reason? Remember I told you about the 1.5% that they're offering? Well, guess what? The reason they offer you a very low rate is number one, first, they'll tie you up to long-term contract. But second, there are other fees. Yes, I'm sorry to tell you this. There are other fees. So now you have to consider, hey, you know what? I'm paying 1.5% to factor my invoices. But what is all this? There's an ACH fee. There's a fee for each invoice I'm factoring. There's a fee for reserves fees. I don't know why factoring companies keep your money. That's a good question to ask. Why are you keeping my money? Okay. Now, guys, this is just a very small amount of extra fees that we've seen in these contracts. So at the end of the day, what you do is you take the 1.5% plus the total amount of hidden fees that you did not know, that now you know about, and make a total of that at the end of the month. In most cases, in the cases that we dealt with, you end up paying more than 4, 5, 6% per month. That's the factoring cost. That is the reality. People get tricked into these long-term contracts because they hear lower rates, but there is no detail or no information provided over the phone about all these extra fees. It's sad. We deal with it all the time. I had a carrier that reached out to me. He was stuck with a company I can't say right now, but I felt really bad for him. I told him, whatever you do, don't sign with a long-term contract. English, he spoke Spanish. He got convinced because they offered him a 2%. Guess what? A month later, he was calling me. He's like, Veronica, please help. Switch me over. I'm paying 6% at the end of the day. And I'm like, I really wish I could help you. But the only way we could help you is if you pay that termination fee, which may go up to $15,000. I've seen those prices. You don't want to get yourself into that situation. Now, one of the things that is very important to I have to say it, transparency is very important. And I'm sure you guys agree with this. You guys are business owners. By the way, congratulations to each one of you for taking this first step. This is the best step that you've done. I promise you. Don't think that, hey, things are going to be easy. Everything you have to make an effort. But we congratulate you for making yourself independent. And this is the place where you want to be. Bobtail is not just a factoring company. Bobtail is here for a win, not just for us, but for you. Take these workshops, for example. We care about the decisions that you make. Don't let these scammers tell you something that is not true. We spoke about so much about fraud and spam. It's going on. It's going on all over the world. Now, I want to share this very quick story, and I'll let you go. Very quick story. Why Bobtail? Listen, the owner to this company, he was working with his father when he was younger, but he learned a lot about this. He said, you know what? My dad needs loads. I'm going to get him loads. He had to find loads. He was doing dispatching. And then on top of that, he had to deal with setting up for factoring services. He came to find out there's a huge need for factoring companies to just set up 30-day setups, because carriers are being tricked. They're being lied to. And unfortunately, there's a lot of money being involved. You don't have the time for that. You don't have time to start losing your money. Not at this point in your business. Stick to Bobtail. We're very transparent. And he said, I'm going to eliminate the inefficiencies that exist for the carrier, because he loved his dad. That's how we became Bobtail.
Thank you so much. You couldn't be more right. I mean, you don't want to be in a long-term contract, and you don't want to get tricked into signing something that you don't understand. So again, even if you're not going to go with Bobtail, even if you have another contract with a company, give us a call. We can always help you, walk you through the different agreements and contracts that you come up with for factoring, and help you to understand what you're going to sign. Other topics would you like to learn more about? Again, on the 25th, mark it on your calendar, same time, same place. Well, not same link, so you're going to have to sign up for it again to get the right link, but same time, in 2 Fridays from now, 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a seminar on fraud prevention. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what does fraud look like in trucking? What does double brokering look like? How you can avoid it? What you can do in the very unfortunate event that you are a victim of it, which we hope never happens. We hope we just get to prevent all of these things from happening to you, and how you can legitimize your business to attract the right customers. So that's coming up in a couple of weeks here. We will be sending out emails to everyone about that. Monte, you asked about recourse versus non-recourse. Really good question. I did just film a video on this that's going to go on YouTube. Non-recourse factoring agreements, technically that definition means that you are protected in certain circumstances if the broker doesn't pay your factoring company. So how factoring works, I have my paperwork, I send it to the factoring company, they pay me upfront for the invoice, and then they charge my customer, right? They go back and get the money from the customer. In a non-recourse agreement, in certain circumstances, you may not be held responsible if the broker doesn't pay your factoring company. A recourse agreement means that you are responsible for the payments that your customers make to your factoring company. Now, the big but in this is that a non-recourse agreement really only applies in very limited circumstances, mainly when the broker goes out of business and files for legal bankruptcy. So that is really the only case where that non-recourse is going to kick in. If you haul a double brokered load, doesn't matter. That's not covered. So you're going to get a chargeback for that. If there's some kind of mistake on your end that leads to, less money paid to your factoring company, you're going to get a chargeback for that, even if you have a non-recourse agreement. At the same time, non-recourse agreements tend to, because they have that protection for when brokers go out of business, they will charge higher rates, much higher rates. They will charge more fees. So the cost of a non-recourse factoring agreement is typically much higher than a recourse factoring agreement. And for the very little protection that it offers, it's generally not worth it. Right? Of course, you are the only person who can make decisions for your business. You are the only person who can reach out and make sure that you're, doing the right things and asking the right people and asking the right questions. But from our experience, and the reason that we've set up our factoring company and our factoring service as recourse factoring is because we can offer better rates, we can charge less money for the service, and we can help carriers with things like this seminar, things like free risk assessments on your loads. Like I said, if you're factoring with us, you can call us and ask us, hey, what's going on with this broker? I'm not sure. This looks fishy. Can you look into it? Right? So we offer those support services before you get a chargeback, so that we can try and avoid chargebacks as much as possible. So definitely be on the lookout. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We really appreciate your presence here. And to all of our viewers on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.